I have outlined, I think, 5 basic areas that I think we need to modernize the IRS in, and I think all 5 of them go together and are important. The first one is to really rethink all of the business practices that we conduct at the IRS so that we can shift the focus towards understanding, solving, and in many cases preventing taxpayer problems much earlier in the cycle so they don't get far downstream and cause severe problems for taxpayers very late in the process.
Many people fear the Internal Revenue Service, IRS, not only because of the financial amounts involved, but because of the vast legal and procedural authority granted to this institution by federal law, making it one of the most powerful government agencies in the United States. Here are the main reasons why the IRS possesses this authority and generates such anxiety. 1. Direct enforcement authority without a court order. Unlike most government agencies that must go to court and obtain a judicial ruling before seizing someone's assets, the IRS has the authority of administrative levy. The agency can issue a levy on bank accounts, wages, and other sources of income directly. They notify the bank or employer, who is legally obligated to transfer the funds to the IRS. Often, the individual only discovers this when they find their account frozen or a large portion of their salary deducted. 2. Liens and seizures. Tax lien. As soon as a tax debt exists, the IRS places a legal lien on all of an individual's property, real estate, cars, financial assets. This immediately impacts credit reports and prevents the sale or refinancing of any assets until the debt is paid. Seizure. In extreme and persistent cases, the IRS has the legal authority to seize physical assets, such as cars, boats, or even real estate, and sell them at public auction to cover accumulated debts. 3. Criminal enforcement powers. The IRS is not just a collection agency. It has a criminal investigation division, IRSCI. In cases of willful tax evasion, the IRS can refer cases to the Department of Justice for criminal prosecution. Penalties include extremely heavy fines and federal prison time. The fear here stems not just from money, but from the loss of liberty. 4. Burden of proof. In many tax disputes, the burden of proof lies with the taxpayer. This means the individual is required to prove that the IRS's claims are incorrect, rather than the other way around. If they cannot provide accurate documentation, records, invoices, receipts, the system presumes the IRS's estimates are correct. 5. Access to information. The IRS has sweeping powers to access financial data. They receive copies of all income forms, such as W-2 and 1099, submitted by companies and banks. They use sophisticated computer systems for data matching, which makes discovering discrepancies between what an individual reported and what the IRS received from third parties almost automated and rapid. 6. Difficulty of negotiation. Although settlement programs, such as an offer in compromise, exist, dealing with the IRS requires complex bureaucratic procedures. Many people fear the IRS because they find themselves facing a bureaucratic machine that does not respond to emotions and does not stop the accumulation of interest and penalties unless precise legal paths are followed. Bottom line, the fear arises because the IRS has the ability to intervene in an individual's financial life immediately and painfully, possessing a long arm of the law that makes tax evasion or avoidance an inherently unequal struggle. But why does this government agency hold such immense power? The answer lies in its vital importance to the U.S. economy, as it is responsible for generating the revenue that constitutes approximately 27% to 28% of the U.S. GDP, when accounting for all levels of taxation. The IRS serves as the primary executive tool for collecting these funds. To grasp the extent of its power, consider the findings from the National Taxpayer Advocates reports. Return on investment. In 2024 alone, the IRS collected $5.1 trillion in revenue with an operating budget of only $12.3 billion, representing a return on investment of approximately 415:1. This figure illustrates why the institution is considered a highly efficient and rigorous money-gathering machine, and why those who attempt to evade it rarely fare well. In this episode, we will discuss some of the most famous tax evasion cases involving public figures, beginning with Nicolas Cage. In 2009, while Nicolas Cage was living a life of extravagance, His financial foundation was silently crumbling. That year, he was hit with a tax lien by the IRS, which demanded $6.3 million in back taxes for 2007 and 2008. Cage claimed his former business manager had misled him and concealed his true tax liability. He filed a lawsuit against the manager, but the IRS remains indifferent to personal disputes. In their eyes, the legal responsibility rests solely on the taxpayer. Cage had no choice but to face the tax machine. To avoid prison, he entered a desperate race to settle his debts. He sold almost everything: his castles, personal properties, and rare collectibles. Much of this was sold at public auctions, often at prices well below market value due to the urgency forced upon him by the IRS. The ordeal devastated his financial stability. Cage was forced to accept roles in B-movies and lower-quality films just to generate the income needed to cover his debts and the mounting interest and penalties. He later remarked in interviews, "I paid every penny to the IRS," describing that period as a daily war for financial survival. At least, however, Cage did not end up behind bars like Wesley Snipes. In the early 2000s, Snipes fell under the influence of extremists who promoted groundless legal theories, claiming that the federal income tax was unconstitutional and that citizens were not obligated to pay it. Snipes did not merely stop paying. He completely ceased filing tax returns for several years, from 1999 to 2004, mistakenly believing he was following a smart legal path to fiscal freedom. While Cage attempted to negotiate his way out of debt, Snipes took a confrontational stance. His tax debts eventually exceeded $15 million. The IRS did not see his actions as an administrative error, but as willful tax evasion. In 2006, he was indicted in Florida. Despite his defense that his misunderstanding of the law was in good faith, the jury was not convinced. In 2008, he was convicted of failing to file tax returns. In December 2010, Snipes entered a federal prison in Pennsylvania, where he served 2.5 years. The prison sentence was not just a loss of time. It was a devastating turning point that caused him to lose major film roles and turned him into an industry outcast for years. Yet, the IRS's greatest trophy remains Al Capone. The story of Al Capone is not merely a tax evasion case. It is a legend that cements the image of the IRS as a relentless hunter. It demonstrates how the agency succeeded where the police, the FBI, and the military had failed. In the 1920s, Capone was the undisputed king of Chicago. He ran a vast empire of bootlegging, gambling, and prostitution. Police knew of his crimes, witnesses were afraid to testify, and corruption reached judges and law enforcement alike. Capone paraded through the streets of Chicago in expensive suits, brazenly declaring, "I am a businessman. I am just giving people what they want." While Capone thought he was untouchable, a small group of IRS agents, known as the Untouchables, were working in the shadows. They didn't hunt for murder or violence. They followed the money. They realized that Capone, despite his brilliance in masking his violent crimes, was making a fatal error. He was flaunting his immense wealth without filing tax returns to account for it. In 1927, the U.S. Supreme Court issued a landmark ruling confirming that illegal income is taxable. This was the knockout blow for Capone. Agents traced his hotel records, luxury clothing bills, and daily expenses, comparing them to his declared income, which was zero. In 1931, Capone was hit with 22 counts of tax evasion. He tried to bribe the jury, but the IRS discovered the plot and swapped the jury at the last minute. Capone was convicted and sentenced to 11 years in the legendary Alcatraz prison. The result was not just imprisonment, but the total collapse of his empire. Without the boss there to manage the money and distribute bribes, his gang disintegrated and his assets were seized. The bottom line is that the IRS is not just a collection agency. It is the ultimate authority. In the American financial world, criminal laws may fail to convict the wicked, but tax laws do not miss. The IRS is the only agency that possesses the power of administrative enforcement. It is judge, jury, and executioner. It does not need to wait for a court order to freeze your accounts or seize your assets, which is why it is the monster everyone fears. Tax evasion is financial suicide. Capone's fall proved that even the greatest criminals fall before the numbers. Snipes' fall proved that ideological defiance does not protect you, but leads you straight to prison. And Cage's crisis proved that financial negligence or misplaced trust does not exempt you from responsibility. You are the first and last person accountable before the IRS.